As 2015 hastens to a close, racial tension throughout the nation continues to grab the headlines. Just this week, Tim Wolfe, the former president of the University of Missouri, was forced to resign because he was not able to handle racial tension on that campus. I'm Michael Reel, and this is RealUrbanNews.com. We are on the campus of the University of Southern California in the heart of Los Angeles. We speak with race expert and legal scholar, Professor Jody Armour. Professor Armour, what a fascinating week in terms of race relation throughout the country. We saw the president of the University of Missouri resign. Liberals take credit for it. Conservatives say he caved due to racial pressure. What's your perspective?
He caved due to the pressure from the faculty, the student body, the athletic team, the football team, which figures centrally in their fundraising and in the brand for the university more generally. He quote-unquote caved or deferred to the spirit of the times we're living in. Really, inclusion, diversity, equity are catchwords not only off campus but on college campuses. The Black Lives Matter movement has made this last 18 to 24 month period of time we've been living through, these hashtags are being spit out like a Pez dispenser, tragically, repeatedly. They sensitize to us. You see it in the polls, in the Pew Research poll, and also in the Gallup and the Pew Research poll show that over the last 18 to 12 months, Americans who are willing to recognize race as a major problem, or even many saying it's the most important and pressing problem in the country, have increased by magnitude, orders of magnitude, from 1% to 13% who say it's the number one problem, from 38% who said the race was a big problem in America before Black Lives Matter, to 56% of Americans now saying it's a big problem, and that's coincided with the Black Lives Matter movement, and it shows the impact it's had, and that impact can be felt even on the college campuses, and that's what we saw. We see in Missouri, not that far from Ferguson, in Columbia, right, we see the spirit that animated the protest around Michael Brown manifesting itself again and spreading across the campus. We're talking about not just the black student organizations, but also faculty members of all races and genders saying we have a problem here and we're going to shut it down too and cancel some classes and show support and solidarity. The student government came out with a resolution in favor of what they were doing. Then the football team, of course, the young man who was on the hunger strike before then. It was a campus-wide statement that we care and believe that much in and about inclusion, diversity, and equity that we're really ready to go to the mat for it. And I think it's a harbinger of things to come. You know, there are a lot of things we can talk about. One of those is what it showed us about the power of the conscious black athlete.
Sure. So we talk about athletes and athleticism and sports. One of our conversations with your colleague was to talk with you about the power of sports. We saw the power of sports displayed or on display in Missouri.
Oh yeah, the power of college athletics can hardly be overstated. You look at the salaries of the top public employees at a lot of universities. You see football and basketball coaches all over the country being the highest paid public employees at these universities, right? Sure. So that's because at those universities, those teams bring in a lot of revenue. Their development offices, which is a euphemism for their fundraising offices, know that a winning team makes alumni more generous. And so on the basis of these football and basketball teams, because those are the two programs that these universities have been drawing in a lot of funds, those funds have been coming in on the backs of primarily young black men. Not only young black men disproportionately, and a disproportionate number of those young black men are from truly disadvantaged backgrounds. So we have universities that are really enjoying a great bounty of giving in many places from their alumni who are getting enormous benefits from these truly disadvantaged young black athletes and not paying any attention to a lot of their concerns, like why am I on the gridiron on Saturday getting lauded and praised, and then Sunday when I come back to campus or Monday I'm getting profiled, you know, because I look like a criminal to the officer who's profiling me.
Let's talk about this. In this Missouri story, we've heard what the students have done to combat the racism. What about the students that are causing these issues? Where are they coming from? And who are they? Are they young people? Are they people who have grown up in America? Have they seen black and brown and females? Are they coming from some remote small town far, far in a land far, far away? Where are they coming from?
Yes, maybe surprisingly, maybe sadly, they're ordinary Americans. They're ordinary, everyday Americans in a lot of ways, because when you even look at the political discussion sometimes, you can hear a lot of things coming out against Obama when he got elected that were ugly and racial in nature, and from all kinds of circles, sometimes some circles that had good means, you know, well-heeled circles, as well as those who are impoverished with education and without. So sadly, racism is still alive and well. We're seeing that from all of this, and we need to think about these issues as not just problems of minorities, but also issues of those who would discriminate against those minorities. We also got to turn the lenses on white privilege and what would lead to this kind of white resentment and white anger.
Are white people scared?
There's some fear. Toni Morrison says certainly when it comes to all these police shootings, that Black Lives Matter has been making sure that we're clear on through the hashtags and through other activities. She says that a lot of these police are just cowards. It's just cowardly. And it's hard to resist that conclusion when you look in some of these cases. I don't think it's just fear with all these people, though. I think some of it's also resentment. You know, we see more and more people not getting their piece of the American dream. There's recent studies in which they talked about middle-aged white folks turning to suicide at unprecedented rates. Yes, and dying at unprecedented rates, right, from stress and other kinds of trauma that's coming from a social system in which the distance between the 1% and the rest is growing. More and more people are struggling just to make ends meet at a middle-class level of existence. And I think resentment, that can lead to resentment. Well, if I'm barely eking it out, you know, here's some competition. Why? And maybe I'm resentful of that competition. Maybe a lot of things. We could talk about it for a while. You know, why during the times of lynchings of black men, even for offenses that had nothing to do with any kind of sexual offense, were there castrations? You know, that went to a collective pathology that was manifesting itself in the way they treated the black bodies that they finally got a hold of and lynched, right? So there's a lot of psychological, Frantz Fanon and others can go into perhaps some of the psychological sources of resentment to blacks from non-blacks. I'm not saying that's where it all is or even most of it is. A lot of it may also be just economic, just a lot of other things going on. But in combination, when you have all these factors converge, you have the stage set for what the students are running into in Missouri and what they're running into in a lot of other college campuses across the nation.
We were talking off camera, you and my cameraman Reggie were talking about the impact of social media. What is that overall impact in terms of race relations in America?
Oh, social media makes all the difference, made all the difference in the Black Lives Matter movement for sure. I was there when the Trayvon Martin verdict, rather the George Zimmerman who shot Trayvon Martin verdict came down, and it was an acquittal, and Black Lives Matter was born as a hashtag from that state oppression in the form of the court system not vindicating the life of that young black male who went to the store to get some Skittles and iced tea, right? And then I saw that hashtag Black Lives Matter really grow and into a political force in Ferguson when it became in part a national movement because of Twitter. Certainly on the ground there in Ferguson, you have to give all the credit to the folks who are out there on the front line. Sure. But the national consciousness was grabbed because it kept trending day after day at number one until the mainstream media had to follow it. And I was sitting there looking on my own Twitter account and seeing, here's this boy lying in the street 3 hours later. Here he is still 4 hours later. I'm out in California looking at these pictures. Sure. And so in my lifetime, I've never seen a social movement activated in this way through digital media, it showed you how the digital media can be an integral part of a profound political movement that we may have never seen before. I'll tell you the one other place I saw it. I've seen it. 1996, the CIA Contra story, Gary Webb reported, San Jose Mercury Press,
Sure.
Kill the Messenger was done about it, a movie recently in which he exposed CIA complicity in the flooding of the streets of LA
Right.
with cocaine in order to fight the communists, Sandinistas, Rick Ross, and
Sure.
et cetera, here, Blandone, and all those. That story, when it was first dropped, was ignored by the oracles of the press, the LA Times, the New York Times, and the Wall Street, and the Washington Post. But black online folks kept it alive. It was the birth of black cyber consciousness around that. And so much kept it alive that you had Deutsch, who was the head of the CIA at the time, leave the safe confines of Langley and come out to Watts to
Sure.
sit down with Maxine Waters to address in a town hall meeting this issue about CIA involvement in the crack trade, right? Sure. And that came out of black cyberspace. That was the birth of black cyber consciousness, really. And you've seen it again with Black Twitter and this hashtag Black Lives Matter movement. It's kind of come full circle.
What's next?
What's next is, this was beyond I think many of our expectations or even hopes that you could have had as much impact as they had in Missouri a couple days ago to topple the highest administrators in an institution, both the president and the kind of chancellor or the provost,
Sure.
the operational person.
Principal.
Yeah, stepped down as well. Both of them came down.
Sure.
They were supported by the football team's coach, the players, etc. Who would have thunk it, as they say? Who could have imagined that you could have had this great an impact through students finding solidarity around these three issues: equity, diversity, and inclusion. And saying those issues are ones that if you ignore as the leader of an institution, as its head, you may pay serious consequences. It's no longer something that you can be indifferent to, and that's what Black Lives Matter has been saying all along. The reason we've been saying Black Lives Matter, they've been saying, is because there's an indifference to black lives. We don't get into the conversation. The reason we have to be so disruptive, the reason we have to shut it down is otherwise you ignore us, otherwise you're complacent. And that's what you really saw happen in this instance. You saw folks say, we're cutting through the complacency with things like hunger strikes, with things like we won't play BYU this weekend, with things like we'll shut down the classes, and so that you as leaders recognize that we as an institution want to define ourselves as inclusive and diverse and equitable, and we'll pay the price for it.
We saw a hint of the power of sports when the former owner of the Clippers was forced to sell the team, and his name escapes me.
Donald Sterling.
I let it go.
Yes.
We saw the players come out with T-shirts on, and they were very vocal about not playing.
Yes.
We saw it in Missouri.
Yes.
Is this the new boycott? Black athletes refusing to play in collegiate competition and professional?
It may be that we're seeing the advent of a new kind of black athlete, one that we haven't seen for maybe 30 or 40 years, going back to Ali, who was very vocal about politics, and Jim Brown, very vocal about politics. Michael Jordan stayed out of politics. He said conservatives buy shoes too. And so he was very, conspicuous in ducking political issues. But then you did have people like LeBron James. I go back to LeBron James. He had the hoodies up for the Miami Heat after Trayvon got shot. And that's one of the first I saw willing to take some skin off his cheek for the sake of solidarity with a victim of an injustice, as a lot of people saw it anyway. And so You had the players at Northwestern say we're workers and we should be able to unionize and get an NLRB judge to say, you know what, you are basically workers. The student-athlete myth is really mostly myth when I look at your schedule and see you having to put 40 hours to 50 hours a week into football-related activities. What time do you have? That's a student-athlete. That's more worker than anything else. Right. And so you do have movements by athletes now in which they're starting to say, we feel solidarity and are ready to express it in ways that we haven't in the past. Not that they didn't feel solidarity in the past, but there's more willingness than ever to express it, and that should make a whole lot of college administrators sleep with one eye open, because what we've done with our colleges around the country for years is taken black, primarily boys, from disproportionately from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they've been the goose that lays the golden eggs. They bring money into the university. They increase the university's brand. You know, they enhance contributions to the university. They give many of the non-athlete students like them, they don't contribute to the university to 20 or 30 years later. You know, maybe if the university is lucky, they'll get something back from them. These players on the gridiron are sacrificing their knees and backs and necks right now to bring in all kinds of benefits to the university. So they really are the geese that are laying the golden eggs, if you will, and they've been ignored and despised and talked badly about and profiled walking across campus. And if this group of people develop some political consciousness and starts flexing its political muscle, it could contribute to the change we've been seeing over the last 18 months to 24 months with the Black Lives Matter movement.
What are you saying to your students as a legal scholar and professor at one of the shining institutions in the world of academia here on the campus of USC in Southern California? You have a global and diverse student body. What are you saying to your students about this movement?
That these are teachable moments, learning opportunities for us all, that if we're trying to produce leaders for tomorrow from USC, they can't be effective if they don't understand these issues of inclusion, diversity, and equity, because the world out there is very diverse. And they're seeing more than ever, like from the Missouri case, that if you don't attend to these issues, they can cost you effectiveness in leadership and even cost you your job. So I tell them, let's take this as a moment that we can reflect on these issues seriously and learn from them. See how they connect with the law, how the ones have been around forever, because I wrote a book about this back in 1997. And they're asking me to come to the book fairs now and continue talking about that book. Why? Because ain't nothing changed but the year it is. That's what I tell them going in. Sadly, the same issues of profiling, police brutality, and mass incarceration I was talking about in 97 haven't changed in 2015.
Let me touch this point. We're looking at the weed laws. Just this week, I tweeted something I thought was funny. I was at Compton Courthouse this week, and the parking garage smelled like weed. And I said, why is the Compton parking garage smelling like weed? And everybody laughed. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, Colorado, they're selling weed.
That's right.
But before that became law, they were locking up African Americans for weed.
That's right.
And now they're selling it.
That's right.
So do we hold the gates open to all these people out of prison?
If we were truly loyal and consistent with our principles, with our founding principles, we would. Look, my dad was sentenced to 22, 55 years for first-time possession and sale of marijuana. He was able to teach himself the law and appeal his own way out, representing himself pro se. But that's how they brought down a lot of black men in those days. We see now that the drug laws are enforced in a way that's racially disproportionate. Even though the usage rates are roughly the same, the incarceration rates are vastly different between blacks and whites and other groups. So we know the marijuana is part of that problem, that getting rid of criminalizing marijuana will get rid of a lot of that disproportionate burden that blacks are bearing because of the discriminatory way we go about enforcing the drug laws. But hopefully we learn a more general lesson from where we're going with marijuana right now. I hope that in about 10 years, people are going to look back and say it's absurd that people ever criminalize marijuana. Just like we look back a little more than 10 years ago, if we go back a little more than 10 years when I was teaching criminal law here at USC, when I was starting to teach up to 2003, it was a felony in many states for a man to share intimacy with another man. Same-sex intimacy could be a felony in many states. I think it's hard for people to believe that we were ever doing that at one time, that we were that, retrograde in our thinking about consensual behavior between adults. Sure. The point here is anytime we get the state involved in cracking down on consensual behavior between adults, whether we're talking about who you love or what you drink, Jack Daniels, they put that in the Constitution. They made alcohol, that wine spritzer that you're drinking, sure, they made that a criminal offense constitutionally. Prohibition, right? For years, that's how puritanical this country can be and how it can through using the criminal process, impose its morality on ordinary citizens. So for us to see that there's always a problem when we allow the state to criminalize consensual behavior, whether it's drugs, whether it's who we love or don't love, then we've given the state way too much power. We've allowed them to criminalize too much. And guess what? We as social minorities, we as marginalized people are going to disproportionately suffer when those laws are enforced.
As this year, 2015, comes to a close and you're looking ahead to 2016, what's your hope for America?
Yeah, my hope for America is honest reckoning. That we'll sit back and say, what we did over the last 30 years with the crack plague and its festering aftermath, it was a big problem. We've hobbled a generation or more of young black males and females, because the black females are on the rise in terms of their incarceration rates, and you see what happened in Spring Valley, where the officer grabbed the young woman and threw her like a rag doll across.
So many scenes.
But this one is so clear. Any of us that have daughters, are you kidding? Any of us that have sisters, any of us that have loved ones, you see that state brutality, the barefaced brutality of the state venting itself on our most vulnerable young people. It should give us all pause, and my hope would be that we're coming to the point now where we're being more skeptical of what got us here, recognizing that what got us here was this age-old distinction between good Negroes and bad Negroes, the so-called politics of respectability that people like Bill Cosby used to spout, when you talk about the pound cake speech, while he was slipping Mickeys in women and raping them, so hypocritically, in an act of first-degree hypocrisy, lecturing young black males about pulling up their pants and disadvantaged people about how you name your kids, as Dr. Huxtable. All of that sanctimoniousness of the last 30 years, if we can get beyond that and start having some honest conversations that are going to heal us and get beyond the blame game that we've been doing for the last 30 years, blaming poor folks for their own problems, culture of poverty thinking, it's your own damn fault, lack of personal responsibility thinking. If we can go there, I think we will come a long way in solving one of the issues that harming the black community most, I think, and that's mass incarceration. That's the equivalent of 1,000 Hurricane Katrinas slamming 1,000 Ninth Wards. I mean, if you look at the damage brought and wrought by the crack plague and its festering aftermath, that's our here on fire issue, and the faster we can get our hands around that, the better.
Dr. Armour, thank you for being kind and truly insightful. Appreciate it.
Michael, my pleasure.
All right, wow, thank you.